Hello and most welcome to 2043 of the series. We will today start with a new article. It is another article by Terry Marks-Tarlow, Fractal Self at Play. We read earlier from Terry Marks-Tarlow. It is about fractal theory. And how fractality can help the understanding of the self, what it is to be human, and it eases up the harsh differences, oppositions between self, world, ego, matter, soul matter, mind matter, all those normally very sharp differences become eased up, less tensed, and more real, oddly enough. This article approaches play through the sciences of interpersonal and nonlinear dynamics. Interpersonal neurobiology is the multidisciplinary study of how a system of the brain, mind, and body develops in the context of another system of brain, mind, and body. Brain, mind, and body. When new parents tickle their baby's toes or stick out their tongues in hopes that their newborn will imitate them, they follow a universal instinct. They follow a universal instinct. In issuing the call to play, parents enter into a lifelong relationship, linking brain to brain, mind to mind, and body to body, creating for both parents and child emotions of joy, curiosity, and discovery. And discovery. And discovery. Because interpersonal neurobiology examines how the brains, minds, and bodies of parents and child become entangled. The subject is inherently both complex and non-linear. Nonlinear dynamics studies how complex systems change all the time. Chaos theory addresses uncertainty, unpredictability, and spontaneous novelty in nature. Complexity theory illuminates how natural systems organize themselves at the edge of chaos, from the bottom up, without centralized control or deliberate planning. In fractal geometry, A fractal is a rough or fragmented geometric shape that can be split into parts, each of which is a smaller copy of the whole, a property called self-similarity. Self-similarity. Because they appear similar at all levels of magnification, mathematical fractals are considered infinitely complex. In a sense, they offer a pattern beneath chaos and complexity. That is, the shape of the whole is reflected in all its parts, whether the parts are of different sizes or on different time scales. So both over time and space. Fractals are ubiquitous throughout nature, found within the clouds, mountains, and rivers. Fractals also permeate our bodies, appearing in branching structures and processes within our arteries, lungs, and neurons. Neurons! Fractals are holistic patterns that reveal how dynamics in time transform into structures in space. As we age, for example, the transient facial expressions that register our emotions become permanent fractal wrinkles etched into our faces. These wrinkle fractals then reflect not only the worries and anxieties that have lately consumed our lives, but also the foundations established during our earliest play. Earliest play. Play is chaotic, complex, and filled with fractals. It is chaotic through its unexpected turns and surprises. Unexpected turns and surprises. Play is complex because it is organized and novel. Play is filled with fractals that lurk within its basic grammars and recursive structures and themes. These fractals become elaborated in self-similar fashion over time. Many toys are fractal. They range from a baby's first nested cups to the self-similar blocks that encourage more complex constructions, to the ornately decorated nesting dolls that accompany some children into adulthood. Into adulthood. Into adulthood. Through the holistic lenses of contemporary science, I offer fractals as one mechanism for establishing continuity between the early play of children and later modes of adult self-expression. Of adult self-expression. Children play, I suggest, to become oriented in and to learn how to navigate social space, which helps them weave strands of genetic inheritance with the intersubjective threads of their lives into an integrated fractal tapestry. Integrated fractal tapestry. This article offers the concept of orientation in social space as a central dimension of being, feeling, and relating. Such orientation locates the embodied self in both physical and social space in order to chart a life course filled with meaning, one that aligns inner vision and outer expression. Outer expression. I first introduced nonlinear science as a broad framework for exploring the development of self through play. Next, I offer a constructivist framework for a development progression of play based on attachment and regulation theory. Regulation theory. I define the self in neurobiological terms and examine how its enlivened core emerges first at implicit unconscious levels through play with attuned caretakers. Attuned caretakers. I then provide evidence for continuity between these early implicit pre-verbal dynamics and later increasingly explicit conscious ones. This sets the foundation for my main thesis. Orientation of the self in social space builds on the orientation of the body in physical space. I draw evidence from 2 lines of research on mammalian brain structure, especially concerning the hippocampus within the temporal lobe. Within the temporal lobe. These show, in short, that whereas rats need a free run of their environments to explore and orient themselves fully in physical space, children need the free play of imagination and pretend games to find the way through social space later. Social space later. Finally, I suggest that the human self is best modeled as a fractal whose wholeness, intact from the start, appears within patterns of self-expression that remain invariant across space and time. 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 I assert that wherever healthy emotional development exists, spontaneous play provide a fractal window into the developing self. Into the developing self. I cite relevant empirical research, draw examples from important figures in history, and close with a personal narrative. Close with personal narrative. The value of nonlinear approaches to play. History has witnessed a broad shift from views of play as frivolous, a mere aimless expenditure of exorbitant energy in children and young animals, to views of play as purposeful, even essential to human development. Generally, the focus of studying play has also shifted from a static and imitative depiction, which reflects society as it currently exists, to a more dynamic view of play's creative potential, which transforms both the individual and society at large. Society at large. Although play has become a serious subject for study, researchers do not agree about its effects or even how to define it. The many approaches to the subject include molecular studies of evolutionary processes and neural development, psychological, sociological, and anthropological investigations have identified a host of affective, cognitive, social, and motor capacities that accompany play, including self-regulation, symbolic representation, narrative skills, divergent thinking, creative expression, self-transformation, meta-communication, gender identification, social competence, community membership, and even the origin of culture itself. While linear science is useful for categorize, cat, categ- categorizing nature and collecting facts, play's exquisite idiosyncrasies often elude its research-based methods. Play's wholeness fragments under traditional research because nonlinear dynamics investigates how systems change over time. Its empirical methods can link the brain time of milliseconds, the subjective or real time of minutes and hours, and the developmental time of years and decades. Within developmental psychology, such nonlinear approaches provide continuity despite change, while highlighting unique paths toward developmental milestones. Developmental milestones. Non-linear methods also help avoid the debate about stages because onward behaviors that appear discontinuous or that seem to occur in stages can be understood in terms of smooth movement and continuous changes in underlying components called parameters. Parameters. Given that human development is filled with periods of critical growth and change, followed by more stable periods, a nonlinear perspective and developmental studies of play seem like an obvious fit. Yet the paradigm has gained traction only recently among developmentalists, as the study of play has enjoyed growing recognition of its significance. Doris Fromberg notes the case elegantly. The way that children put their experiences together resembles a moving web of connections more than a stored set of stationary drawers or a growing pile of packages. Fromberg highlights play's dynamic qualities. Play is multifaceted. It changes constantly and unfolds differently in different settings. For example, a young child's play in a department store differs from play in a classroom block corner, play at the beach, or in the case of children in Africa, play beside the field in which mothers are working. Children play alone, with others, with objects, and with their imaginations. The unpredictable surface forms change as children play, but the relationship between reality and fantasy functions in predictable ways. In predictable ways. Play functions as both a verb and a noun. Both as a verb and a noun. Rather than a category, property, or stage of behavior, play is a relative activity. Is a relative activity. Helen B. Schwartzman similarly cautions against using definitions, classifications, and metaphorical transformations that reduce play to something else. Karen Vanderven introduces play as a significant complex adaptive system within the human development, with chaotic aspects that embrace and generate within other complex adaptive systems, continuously representing and generating information. Generating information. Vanderven notes Margaret Wheatley's observation that through play, children seek out what adults so often strive to avoid: disequilibrium, novelty, loss of control, and surprise. 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 Vanderven offers the metaphor of the protean self, suggesting that play helps children learn to adapt and respond to change, preparing them to live in a chaotic world. In a chaotic world. In a chaotic world. Vanderven's list of chaotic features of play illustrates its adaptive uses. Play is recursive. Play can be repeated time and again, which makes it valuable in learning to construct things. To construct things. Play helps children create a self as they build an outside world. As they build an outside world. For the child, this inner and outer construction occurs through the recursive unfolding of feedback gleaned from continual interactions with people and objects. To understand the notion of recursion, consider an example relevant to play, game theory. In the typical scenario, a pair of gamers plays several rounds. Success of each player depends upon the choices of the other. During every round, each participant decides anew whether to act cooperatively, which promises big payoffs, but also threatens big losses or to act selfishly, which offers greater certainties but delivers smaller rewards. Smaller rewards. Smaller rewards. The game is recursive because its feedback, the new information generated by the outcome of each round, gets continually recycled into the system. Recycle into the system. Through recursion, each round changes the system as a whole while serving as a foundation for the next round. Game theory has become an important tool in the study of social decision making as well as the neurobiology of risk taking. Play uses recursive feedback to build complexity in children's system of brain, body, and mind. Each round is holistic because it calls on the history of all previous rounds. At the cognitive level, information from the novel exploration of games, toys, and other things is recycled, helping children build internal structure, gather insights, take small risks, and create new schemes. By recursively enfolding end products as new foundations for future rounds of play, children bootstrap developmental competences into the daily activities. Recursion also proves important at the neurobiological level. As I discuss later, early play provides a critical feedback to calibrate and coordinate sensory, affective, cognitive, and behavioral systems. And I will here put a pause on 43, sorry. So the fractality is itself a play. It's a play with what is in between. So it lacks this strictness, fixation that is almost always associated with linearity. This is, however, more encompassing. more allowing. I'll go for some quotes. We can go to page 32. So Benoit Mandelbrot is extremely important in this case. He is the discoverer slash inventor of the Mandelbrot set, the most advanced set in the whole of universe, or the one singular most complex thing in the universe. In a sense, this is like 6 lines down, they offer a pattern, self-similarity, beneath chaos and complexity. That is, the shape of the whole is reflected in all its parts, whether the parts are of different sizes or on different time scales. Go down to that page. Fine. Such orientation locates the embodied self, the last sentence on the page, in both physical and social space, in order to chart a life filled with meaning, one that aligns inner vision and outer expression. This is something that we looked so closely into when we've been studying Wittgenstein. Paul Johnston, Paul Livingstone, Francis Wallin, Severin Schroeder, Baker, Eugene Fisher, Hautang, and many more. One of the most problematic is, in Wittgensteinian term, that the idea of a complete disjunction between sign and signified, or the idea that language is depicting something out there that is absolutely self-sufficient, self-providing. This is handled in a different way with fractality. It's in a great way because it also eases up these sharp definitions and fixed standpoints, make it foreseeable. You can enter into them. And once we enter into this, we see that the inside, where the homunculus should be, or the inner core of the self, or the inner core of the words, where all their meaning is stockpiled somehow in the inside of the inside, where everything sits. This is belied by fractality that shows the complexity on the outside is what we usually mean or use. It's an action. Inside is an action. It doesn't signify a fixed standpoint, a place that never moves. Rather, it's the possibility of a widening of everything. On page 33, we have another one here. 7 line. This sets the foundation for my main thesis, Orientation of the self in social space builds on the orientation of the body in physical space. Oh, physical space. So, whatever you mean by physical space, this is where it all starts. It's in the meeting point, the liminal zone, where one outside nets meet the other, and where we have a fruitful exchange. In this fruitful exchange, everything happens. This is the birth zone. And the outsideness is also not an insideness. The objects do not have, how can I explain this, a sort of mass inside where all reality is stored, an origo of the insideness. I think that origo is very close to the outside origo, or the origo of the orthogonal perpendicular directions of the Cartesian space. The origo idea that the objects have an inner meaning often points to the insideness of them, whereas in reality it's on the outside, or in a dynamic outside that opens up to everything, which is not closed off in that way, in that secluded way. Continue at the bottom of 33, we have this. How in the play, we develop as children. There is a development, an advancement, a learning, and learning is a processing that is fragmental, not linear, and where psychological, sociological, and anthropological investigations have identified a host of effective cognitive, social, and motor capacities that accompany play, including self-regulation, symbolic meaning, meaning-making, creative expression, self-transformation, meta-communication. To be compared, I'm not going to read the whole, to be compared with what we learn from reflexes in the Alexander technique and neurology. The moving of the hand that follows the moving of the head, the gaze and the hand follow suit in a reflex. But in this sort of play, very simple play, child learns about space and putting their eyes on something outside of them. And I'd say that in this also learn where they are and that they are. All those things comes out of the play. So it's not just wasting energy on, on playing. It is incredibly important. It is also iterative. It builds on everything that has previously gone on. Once more, very Wittgensteinian, Derridian. The previous plays accumulate to make the reality, the new reality, come to the fore, to be existing, to be something that would not happen if it was not for the possibility of that developmental fractal thing. Non-linear, not goal-oriented in the traditional linear way. It's a play where you can learn that selflessness at a certain level gives actually better outcome because of the more openness. It is not a matter of morality or having to do the better thing. It's working better. It has a voluntary side to it that you won't find in the Newtonian fixed way. I think I am there. I really like this new article here. Play is important. All life is a play, I'd say. Well, come play with me. Thank you very much for participating. Have a very beautiful day, morning, evening, or whatever you are. Night, maybe. Do enjoy. Bye bye.